And I think it's really easy for entrepreneurs who know the technology so well and know all the interesting pieces of it to go down rabbit holes with magnesium mines and other areas that are hot with lithium production. There are a lot of things we could have probably talked about in terms of, hey, who have been your customers? What is the revenue from those customers? What are you, which part of this are you making yourself versus which parts go with the partner? What are some of the metrics, dollars per square foot? So I think, as an entrepreneur, having in your head, hey, these are the key lines I want to make sure that I touch on, and really censoring yourself to get to them is helpful, but hard.
Welcome to Cleantech Forward, a foresight podcast where we explore clean tech customers, capital, and Canada's path to net zero. Tune in to learn more about Canada's most exciting clean tech startups, industry success stories, investor insights, and academic initiatives as we accelerate the growth and impact of clean tech together.
This Cleantech Forward podcast is supported by Gowling WLG. A global leader in intellectual property law, Gowling WLG works alongside Canadian cleantech companies to develop IP strategies that maximize business opportunities and increase market share while protecting valuable innovation. From idea to investment to international expansion, Gowling WLG understands the potential of your intellectual property at every stage of growth. Visit gowlingwlg.com/cleantech to learn how they can support your business today. Welcome to Cleantech Forward. I'm Jeanette Jackson, the CEO of Foresight Canada. Today on Cleantech Forward, the panel of investors is back with another entrepreneur ready to pitch them on their technology. carbonNEXT director Jason Switzer is joined by co-host Marty Reed of Evok Innovations and Carly Anderson from Prime Mover Labs to hear a pitch from Scott Jenkins of ZS2 Technologies. Scott discusses his technology, his thoughts on the barriers facing disruptive innovators, and his vision for the future of our built environments.
Welcome back. I'm Jason Switzer. I'm one of your hosts today at our exciting new series of podcasts featuring entrepreneurs in the clean tech sector pitching to some of the world's leading clean tech investors. And my co-host and partner in crime on this, Marty Reed of Evok Innovations. Marty, welcome.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be with you again. And real quick background, I head up efforts at Evok Innovations, an early stage venture firm focused on the energy transition. I sit in Vancouver, but have close ties down to Silicon Valley. I've kind of split my time, about 15 years as an entrepreneur, mostly venture-backed companies, and now 15 years in clean tech venture. And excited to have back with us Carly Anderson, good friend of Evok and a fellow hard tech investor.
Thanks, Marty. It's great to be back again. My name is Carly Anderson. I'm a chemical engineer and partner at Prime Movers Lab. We are a breakthrough science tech investing firm focused on companies with the potential to transform billions of lives. I, in particular, look at the energy, infrastructure, and climate tech areas. My background's in chemical engineering, but across the energy space in commercial nuclear, in advanced materials for batteries, thermal electrics, a host of other applications, and in water chemistry and low temperature plasma. Also a former startup veteran and just really excited to be here.
Awesome. Now let me set the stage. Our entrepreneur is off stage right now and the curtain is raising. And there he is, Scott Jenkins, President and CEO of ZS2 Technologies, recently anointed to the inaugural Foresight 50, the list of Canada's most investable clean tech companies. I guess, Carly, will have to get you to practice to say Z, since it's not typically used in the US.
I'm going to butcher that name every time, but I'm going to do my best.
There you go. Okay. So, Scott, welcome.
Well, thank you. And in Carly's defense, our growing list of US partners, our tech partners, as we call them, we've got most of them to now say Z as they participate in their ZUs or training sessions, which we spell for your benefit, ZED, so that we force you to say Z. So it's coming. Anyways, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to the chat today.
So take it away, Scott. Why don't you give us some insight into your technology, where you're at, and blow away our investors?
Sure. So quick summary, ZS2. We founded the company. Another shout out for Carly, my co-founders, one of whom is a PhD chemist, Dr. Doug Brown. Really, we're developing and commercializing innovative materials for the construction industry, for infrastructure that are low carbon, high performance, but then borrowing from our prefabricated construction background for myself at Dirt Environmental Solutions and Pure Technologies, my former two companies, and reducing waste, delivering to site, products that are ready to go. So reducing labor, transportation, logistics. Everything we do, hence the Z, based on chemistry. We really are a chemistry company, clean tech company, and it's based on magnesium cement technologies. So, let me start off by just saying, a lot of people that listen to probably this podcast, especially folks that have reached out to us through Foresight, and thanks again, really fortunate to be named to the Foresight 50. We're realizing that Portland cement, traditional cement, is the second largest contributor of greenhouse gases on this planet, 8 to 12%. For every 1 ton of cement production, 1 ton of CO2. So it's a challenge. And we think we've come up with a great solution, and then marrying that with our construction background, already deploying that commercially to clients.
And that was a good kind of elevator pitch, if you will. Can you maybe expand a bit more on how you're actually reducing the carbon intensity? I would suspect most folks listening understand that a lot of that carbon intensity comes from lime kilns and the production of the cement that ultimately gets turned into concrete. So help me understand that. And then I want to understand how you think about managing regulatory civil codes. We've got essentially 100 years or 200 or 300 years of understanding how Portland cement works and convincing a city, a state, a province to allow you to come in with some, as they might view, experimental cement. I'd be keen to hear how that pathway has gone for you.
That's a great question, actually. And I don't get asked that question very often at all because it's complex, but it's something that we've focused a lot on in the early days at ZS2. So let me take a step back just real quick for a quick little cement lesson. Portland cement is limestone, CaCO3. So it's kind of a double whammy when we make cement, which, unfortunately, other than water, this is the most consumed product by man or, compound on earth. It's literally, that's how much we use of it annually around the world. Limestone exists everywhere. Portland cement was invented in the 1800s in England and in Germany. I'm based here in Calgary, Alberta. So as we drive to the Rocky Mountains near Exshaw or Canmore, if you will, Lafarge has a huge plant. They're taking limestone down from the mountain. So the double whammy is that mountain, that limestone has CO2 embedded under geological times in the rock. But to get it out to create the limestone or the cement formulation that we need, we're actually going to heat it up to 15 or 1600 degrees, depends on the formulation they need. So we're going to use all this energy just so we can actually release CO2. So that's the double whammy. So we are actually purposely releasing CO2 and using a tremendous amount of energy to do that, to create the glue, if you will, for concrete, aggregate, and the roads, the bridges, foundations, everything in our world. So that's a big challenge. Now, the benefit to the world is limestone, with the exception of the Middle East, the Caribbean, small areas of the planet, it's readily available. Here's where it really gets interesting. The world actually has been using cement far before Portland cement was ever invented. And one of the original cements was magnesium cement. So magnesium cement, Great Wall of China, Roman aqueducts, the Pantheon, largest unsupported structure known to man. They've all stood the test of time. It's much stronger cement, much lighter. You can use less materials. But also the chemical reaction to create magnesium cement is you have to heat it up to 500 degrees, 400 degrees sometimes. So much lower, and you're not causing a release of nearly as much CO2. The other great advantage of it is magnesium. And for anybody who's listening to this, in terms of an inert, safe, sustainable material, if you take a multivitamin, you probably take a magnesium pill, or it's in your daily diet. Magnesium is very, very safe, but it also will bind with CO2 during the curing process. Now, not a lot. So in terms of really reducing the CO2 footprint of cement, we're getting rid of the huge off-gassing from heating up that rock. We're reducing all that energy needed. But what we do at ZS2 is we've come up with a proprietary formulation, thanks to some of our strategic partnerships in the magnesium industry, that actually uses their off-gassing, and we increase the CO2 capture in our product, and we use 17% CO2 in our formulation. This isn't just a sequestering, though, for us. It actually makes our product, because of the chemistry, stronger. So this is our proprietary formulation. So what we're doing now I'm going to talk, and I apologize, this is a long-winded answer, but if I could, kind of attack the code question, because that's a real big challenge. Building codes, I used to joke, the most powerful person in the world next to my wife is the building inspector, right? The building codes are antiquated. I'll be honest, at ZS2, like, we think, the buildings we live in, we heal in, we go to school in, like, for too long, they've been built to minimum codes, to minimum standards, right? We still have to live in that world, though, as a company. Last month was actually our busiest month ever as a company. We completed 19 projects for clients. We have invested heavily in third-party certifications. That's with the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, Northeastern University, QAI Laboratories. Actually, unfortunate right now, all of the terrible flooding in the Lower Mainland, we have panels ready to ship to the Vancouver lab at QAI for further testing. Been delayed, obviously. And Intertech. What's also important here in Canada is a CCMC number. So that's a Canadian Construction Materials Center number through the National Research Council, so our federal government. We've been fortunate, a big part of ZS2 and getting us off the ground and running so fast has been our partnership with a company called IPB Systems, which had a CCMC number. And we've now been able to take their traditional manufacturing products and overlay it with our tech board, which is our proprietary magnesium sheathing board, and get full CCMC certification. It's a great question. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's probably been the biggest single line item, and thanks to our investors' support at this point, for us to invest in addition to all the R&D, because it's the only way we can gain the commercial success as rapidly as we want to. So it's a really important question. I don't get asked that nearly enough.
Yeah, well, awesome, Scott. Thank you for that that insight into Canadian building codes. Pretty interesting stuff. In terms of the some of your next focuses, like, this sounds like a long process from making cement to completing a house or a project. Can you help me manage my expectations as an investor? What are you building, and what are you prioritizing in the short term in terms of the most important thing to grow this company?
Yeah. So where we are right now, and this is where it gets a little tricky, is we import a magnesium board, our formulation, proprietary to us. We get it manufactured for us in China. The reason we get it manufactured for us in China, it's not cheaper. It's that China, Russia, and North Korea have 65% of the world's raw magnesium supply. So if we go back to kind of the real quick history of Portland cement, magnesium cement, and I referenced that limestone is everywhere, magnesium is not everywhere. Because the question could be, why isn't this ubiquitous in the construction world, or why don't we use more magnesium cement if it's so wonderful? The truth is, it's just not readily available. So right now, from a commercial perspective, we have our board, we have it certified, our production plant is certified. We sent QAI labs over there. We have all this chain of command, PhD chemists on staff. Perry, our newest member of our research team, has her master's in chemistry. We really focus on quality control, the chemistry. We take that board, it's high performance, probably the most fire resistant building material known to man. And we sell the sheathing, but more importantly, we integrate it into a prefabricated, structurally insulated panel. So a SIP panel, we call it. So think about, we would do the exterior, we would replace the 2x4s, the insulation, the sheathing for your house, school, light industrial building, and clinic. And it arrives in one package. So that's great. That's a great business, and it's a high performing product, but logistics, obviously, we know are a challenge. Lower Mainland, again, as an example. Here's where I'm really proud. And this is the made in Canada piece of the puzzle. There is a magnesium oxide mine in Western Canada that's been operational since the 1980s. It's one of the highest efficiency mines in this industry worldwide. It's owned by a very large German company by the name of Refa Technik. They're our strategic partner. They are behind or partially behind ZS2. They're our partner on R&D, development, commercialization. So the longer term plan, maybe medium to long term, is a made in Canada solution to be the first ever non-Chinese version of these precast sheathing products and other products. The suite of products, here's where it gets really exciting. So this is the blue sky billions and billions idea. Again, it goes back to how much Portland cement do we use? Not just ready mix. Think about bricks for your yard or landscaping. Think about bridges. Think about precast panels. Think about pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe, something I'm very familiar with from my time at Pure Technologies when we were a young company. So, I'm not saying these are areas of focus for us. Right now, our area of focus is structurally insulated panels to build you a safer, healthier, fire-resistant, higher R value, higher U value home, condo, school on a rapid timeline on a prefabricated basis.
I guess I want to understand a little more just how scalable is this? The idea of a single site in Canada from a project and or a business perspective sounds quite promising. From a venture perspective sounds quite terrifying. And so I also expect that as we try to ship these products, there's a reason why kind of concrete or cement, at the very least, is a very distributed global market. Generally, you don't want to be shipping too far. And so I suspect that the further you are shipping your product, the worse the LCA gets, or the life cycle analysis, or sort of carbon reduction. So how do I think about that? Like, how ultimately scalable is this? If we said, we wanted to achieve a reduction of CO2 of 1 million tons a year or 500 million tons a year, which is, we can just say whether or not that's reasonable, but that as an example is the benchmark that I think Breakthrough Energy uses when they look at opportunities. So help me understand, kind of how scalable and from a carbon reduction perspective, how meaningful this could be.
Yeah. So another great question. Also another question we don't get very often, because things are going so quick for us just here in Western Canada and Pacific Northwest of the United States. So a couple things. So I'm not going to get into some of the detailed proprietary pieces too much for obvious reasons, but let me kind of give you some tidbits of a few things. So again, limestone everywhere in the world, or almost everywhere in the world. Magnesium oxide from a mine perspective, not very readily available. China, Russia, North Korea, high quality mine in British Columbia, refined in Exile, Alberta, our strategic partner. That mine, 200-year life, fantastic. That's a portion of the formula. There are other key ingredients, including magnesium chloride and magnesium sulfate. The third most abundant element in the ocean is magnesium. So anywhere there is high salinity brines, you have a tremendous amount of magnesium. Let me give you an analogy to another industry that a lot of clean tech folks are familiar with, lithium extraction. A lot of companies working on technologies for lithium extraction. The technologies are great. They work. They also work for magnesium, actually. In many of the high salinity brines, Pennsylvania, Southeast Saskatchewan, Alberta, Chile, all these companies are working on it. Usually it's about 8 to 10 times magnesium to the lithium in terms of parts per million. Now, let me leave you with another thought without getting into too many details about some of the conversations we're having. One of the challenges that the world has, of course, is fresh water. So we've seen in our lifetimes, even before our lifetime, a proliferation of desalination plants around the world. Huge one just north of San Diego, actually. So not just in areas like whether it's Caribbean or the Middle East or Australia. I mean, they are around the world. The challenge with some of the desalination plants, of course, is they end up with high salinity brines. They still have liquid, and generally they pump it back out. But those high salinity brines, in terms of a part per million of magnesium, through the roof. If we could extract some of that, again, the technologies exist thanks to the lithium business or technologies, we would make their effluent much safer. Unfortunately, a lot of these people, they're pumping it. Now, some of the US plants are actually taking all the minerals out because of EPA regulations before they pump it, back out 2 miles, and they're stockpiling it. So it's sitting there. So again, there's other pieces to the puzzle a little bit, but we actually see a big piece of our world domination strategy, if you will, is that we have mapped out exactly where to get the magnesium and localized production, because you nailed it when you're talking about LCA. So this was a big strategy that we rolled out when I was the president of DIRT, right? Was we opened a plant in Savannah, Georgia. We opened a plant in Phoenix, Arizona. I moved my family to Phoenix, Arizona. My children were in school down there for a while. Localized production, I believe, is the future. And that's part of our piece of the manufacturing. Very easy for us to manufacture locally and close to our customer base.
All right. So Scott, maybe lightning round style, what made your customers, these 19 projects, adopt? Was it cost? Was it schedule? Was it sustainability? Was it something else?
I'd say number one, fire resistance. So a lot of our customers right now, rural, quite worried about fire. We just received our WUI Wildland Urban Interface certification from the state of California. Insurers won't let you build in these areas unless you show fire resilience.
That was awesome. Great. And what are you building next? Last question.
Right now we're building, now this is kind of funny, we're building a hog barn for an agricultural client in Saskatchewan. Their biggest concern, mold, high humidity environment. They want a strong structure. It's agriculture. They're worried about backing tractors in, but they're worried about mold.
All right.
Awesome. Well, let's turn the table. Scott, you got a chance to ask our fantastic investors anything. What would you like to know about your pitch and the reaction to it?
Well, maybe a couple kind of overall questions for us is, from where we're operating, I think it's not that we see, this wasn't why we started the company. We just believed we could do something better in this arena. But from all the other companies you see, you've invested in, or you're partnering with, is the cement industry on people's radar as something that needs, it needs tectonic change, not just incremental change? That'd be my first question.
I could certainly tackle that one. It is very much in vogue right now. As we think about decarbonizing the economy, we inevitably end up talking about, quote, tough to abate industries, which is generally concrete and steel. And so a lot of interest, a lot of competition. As companies like CarbonCure last year, I think, was named the Cleantech Company of the Year. And there are probably half a dozen other companies that I could name that we've looked at in the last kind of 6 months in this space.
Okay. But, and interesting, I'll give a little shout out again to one of my co-founders. So my two co-founders, Kristen Davis and Dr. Doug Brown. Doug started his career actually at Carbon Engineering. So taking CO2 out of the atmosphere is near and dear to his heart, and he's still a founding shareholder of that company. So, second question I'd ask is, access to capital. One thing for us as a small company, growing company, is just trying to. We've been fortunate. We have some great supporters, but it's trying to time those raises. And I guess my question would be advice for our team on when to raise more money, the larger amounts from a Series A to a Series B. We obviously we want to have enough resources to execute, but I'll be honest, at times it's been bumpy. We've gone faster, or at times we've thought, well, how much of the company are we? And I think giving away is not the right term, right? Our investors are a lot of them have ended up being customers, but that's something we struggle with, is like, when to start talking to people about the next big step forward. And I don't know the answer there.
Yeah, I think high level, it's never too early to start a conversation. But one thing that we really focus on is, where are those value inflection points? And I can see why it's hard in this space, where there's a couple of things that need to happen in terms of material production, SIP manufacturing, and then project execution. So, thinking through, hey, does this project unlock a 100-unit contract, or does this project unlock the next scale manufacturing facility? When you hit those, when you can tie to, like, hey, if you put in this much money, there's going to be this very clear growth event that's going to happen. That's something we really like to see. And I know you have a challenge there, but this is definitely, like Marty said, a space we're all watching.
That's helpful, actually. That's really helpful to think about, if this amount of investment and support, or this amount will get us here, like, to think about it, what it can do.
Exactly. And and if you can point to, this is the block we just completed, or we just did this thing, which has unlocked this partner, we just signed this LOI, we just completed this milestone. It's both forward looking and retrospective.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's very helpful.
Scott, I'm afraid, and this is the worst part of this, that we're out of time, but we're so grateful for you coming on today.
Scott, it was a pleasure. Great meeting you.
Definitely great to meet you, Scott.
Thank you.
So you heard the pitch. Any insights that you draw from that might be relevant to other entrepreneurs?
I'll just say I've been doing this quite a while, and it's the first time I've heard hog barn used in a venture pitch. So that was a first. But in all seriousness, this is, as we talked about, a pretty hot space. There's a lot of discussions going on about how we decarbonize this sector. And so I think if he can really button up his story, this has legs and could be very backable. And part of that button up the story is there was a lot of moving parts there. We could get magnesium from brines. Well, we could do a mine up here. Well, we could, if they could kind of tighten it down so I, as an investor, could see, okay, what's the difference in carbon today versus with his system? And here's how we could take it from 1 to 2 to 10 to 100, facilities, projects, plants, et cetera. I think that'd be really helpful. But it's a nice, tight, concise deck would really make this, I think, quite backable.
Yeah, totally agree. A little tightening would help. Marty, I love the question about the certification and regulatory requirements. And I think he did a really great job of laying out what they've done in terms of third-party validation, and a lot of great work there. And I think it's really easy for entrepreneurs who know the technology so well and know all the interesting pieces of it to go down rabbit holes with magnesium mines and other areas that are hot with lithium production. There are a lot of things we could have probably talked about in terms of, hey, who have been your customers? What is the revenue from those customers? What are which part of this are you making yourself versus which parts go with the partner? What are some of the metrics, dollars per square foot? So I think, as an entrepreneur, having in your head, hey, these are the key lines I want to make sure that I touch on, and really censoring yourself to get to them is helpful, but hard.
One last comment I'll make is the fire resiliency. I think that could be brilliant. I do not hear that too often. And if that is an attribute that they can really meaningfully demonstrate, I would dial that up in the story. Because I think you saw both Carly and I are sort of eyes and ears perk up. We said, ooh, as a guy who lives in BC and Carly's down in the Bay Area, we are very understanding of what fire risk is these days.
I was not expecting that. And that was a total aha kind of moment at the end of that talk.
Yeah, same.
Well, and I think that goes to, the value of doing your research on your investors, both of you with that experience in fire-prone regions of North America, and the fact that they've got traction in California as well as in the Canadian market, maybe could have come through a bit stronger. I recall a quote from Reid Hoffman where he said that securing investment is not necessarily a victory. It's as much an obligation as a victory. And I wonder if you'd comment on that.
I will say, I don't want to question Reid or his intent, but with bringing on investor capital, there are very clear expectations and accountabilities that shift. And so, I think just through experience of sitting on multiple boards and companies that have scaled, we can bring a lot of value in how we help and lean in and support our companies. But yeah, there's a price to that, both in terms of equity, but also in terms of what we expect and professionalism and reporting and transparency. And that's not right for every entrepreneur. And we intentionally try to screen out those that we think are most collaborative. And it's an important component for us.
One question we haven't gotten yet that I'm waiting for somebody to ask is, what value can we bring to their company? And not just in terms of some of the broad things you might see on our websites, but in terms of specific connections to their industries, experience and problems they're going to face with scaling, et cetera. So that is always a fair question. And one, I think, speaking to that quote, it's an obligation to get that investment, not just in terms of capital, but in terms of resources and expertise.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cleantech Forward. Next week, I'll be talking to Efor Fells-Williams. Efor is the founder of Cluster Navigators and a person many consider to be a founding father of cluster development as an economic strategy. I look forward to seeing you there.
To learn more about Foresight's programs, events, and more, visit us at foresightcac.com or follow us on social at ForesightCAC.